to hear. My dear beloved students here actually participated here. After 300 years, Kant is alive here due to his commitment. In the earlier, there one discussion, students asking, what is the young lady asking here, so what about the Nishkama Karma? Due to the Nishkama Karma, in the Kohenberg of Germany, Kant is playing his role as a philosopher and academician. Then, after 300 years alive here, they Kant. We discuss about the Kant here. So, Kant is the role model to the youngsters here. Kant, not only a modern philosopher, there is a lot of modern philosophers from Descartes onwards, but the Kant, his place is a very vital and a special place is there in the philosophy. Why? Because his discipline is providing an important role in the entire field of philosophy. So, Immanuel Kant is a rationalist or empiricist. There will be a big discussion among the young scholars right now. But he is a bridge to the empiricism, rationalism to empiricism. That is my important argument here. So, Immanuel Kant. Actually, the Immanuel Kant is a man of science. He's contributed a lot to the role in the field of science. His research is on the earthquakes, and he produced so many books on the earthquakes and the moving of a globe and the global tendency in the geography. He also studied a lot. He produced so many books on that. However, his most significant contributions come from philosophy also, with works such as a critique of pure reason and critique of practical reason, which transformed the modern thought. So, to fully appreciate the Kant's philosophy theories, it is important to understand the intellectual landscape before him. He shot his bridge, the gap between the rationalism and empiricism, to open the school's thought of this modern philosophy. Promotes rationalist philosophers such as Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, and Wolff emphasizes the intellect as the source of knowledge. They believed in the innate ideas and the self-evident truth, arguing that knowledge arises slowly through the operations of the mind. According to these views, knowledge is derived from the intellect alone. Truth is what appears rational and logical constant. Sense perception is unreliable, and only reason can lead to true knowledge. This perspective is known as a rationalism. And second word, knowledge comes only through experience. According to the empiricism, knowledge is adequate through sensory perception and experience. The true nature of things can't be understood without direct observations. So this is the main bridge to the empiricism and rationalism. This ongoing debate between the rationalism and empiricism shaped the evolution of philosophy. Ancient philosophers such as Parmenides to argue the knowledge gained through the sense in the unreliable. The Socrates in 470 introduced the dialectical method, emphasizing the intellectual reasoning. Plato built to the Socrates ideas of the proposing the knowledge raised within the mind. Aristotle, in the context, short the balance, argued that knowledge requires both the sense perception and the rational analysis. By the 16th and 17th centuries, materialism gained the prominence with intellectual assessment in the knowledge should be based on reason and critical inquiry. This led to conflict between the religious authorities and philosophers. Religious scholars argued that faith and divine teachings were beyond the rational security, while materialists propound individual freedom and the empirical investigation. Kant developed the empiricism. Empiricism is gained strength in the 17th and 18th century. Descartes introduced the mathematical skepticism, attempting to establishing the knowledge and the frame intellectual foundation. Spinoza used it in a geometrical method to develop his philosophical system, while Leibniz argued for a harmonious universe governed by mathematical principles. Empirical philosophers, including the Schopenhauer, Epicurus, and Skepsis, argued that the human experience is the ultimate standard of truth. The argument that the knowledge comes from the source of sense perception. Hippocrates applied the empirical method to medicine, distinguished it from the religion and philosophy. Francis Bacon introduced the inductive method, which emphasizes the drawing the universal principle from observed experiences. John Locke, a major prompt of empiricism, and argued that knowledge comes from experience, not from innate ideas. Is distinguished between primary qualities and secondary qualities. Building in the Locke's ideology, George Berkeley developed the subjective idealism, propounded that only perception, mind, and relationship exists beyond the material world all through. David Hume took empiricism to its extreme, arguing that we can't know anything beyond our sensory impressions. He rejects the causality, stating that our belief in the cause and effect relationship is based on the habit rather than logical necessity. This radical skepticism posed serious challenges to both science and religion. This was a major argument by the other philosophers on empiricism. It is related by the Kant also accepted all these arguments. Actually, here our students is need to develop more knowledge relating to the contemporary issues. In the contemporary ages, there will be now we are all enjoying a lot with the modern ideals from the various parts of the world. So the modern science and technology will also exist with the rationalistic ideals of the Kant. Before the German philosophy and after German philosophy, we clearly divided these world philosophy schools. There will be a fascistic ideals, and there is a feudalism is ruled in the world before Kant. Then the Kant idealism and the rationalism is coming into the force. The Hegel and Marx developed in the various styles of their idealistic views. So it will be the control. It will be the control the world to stop the feudalistic tendency in the human behavior. So it will lead to the equality among the humans and equality and ethical importance among the people. So this kind of debates is began after the Kant's only, because the Kant is the great man. Kant's philosophy is the great truth still and in further also. The goal of the Kant's philosophy is called a critical, because they systematically examine the limits and the conditions of this human knowledge. Is three major works known as the critique. They each explore different aspects of this human reason. One is this critique of pure reason. It is nothing but an investigation for the fundamentals of the human knowledge. A critique of pure reason is a investigation the fundamentals of human knowledge, and is a critique of the practical reason. It is examine the morality and ethics. This third one is a critique of judgment. It is explores the aesthetics and teleology. So these three books are the modern approach to the human understanding. So it is a great Next, in a simple example, he is asking the people, what can we know? A critique of pure reason. What can we know? What should we do? A critique of practical reason. What can we hope for? A critique of judgment. This is a simple examples to simple questions to understand the philosophy of the Kant. At another point of view, yesterday our Ganesh Prasad Das sir, basically we here for the promoting the ethics of the Kant. The ethical perspective is the most important. Is in a Copernican revolution. Is the one of the part of the Kant's contribution to the development of this ethical behavior of the human. The Kant's most radical idea was this: knowledge is not a passive reflection of the reality, but an active process shaped by the mind. Before Kant, philosophers assured that the mind simply conformed to the external works. Kant reserved this assumption, arguing that the world as we perceives it conform to the cognitive structure of the mind. The shift often called Kant's Copernicus revolution is central to the transcendental idealism. We do perceive reality as it is in itself, and we perceive reality as it appears to us. It is called a phenomena. And thirdly, a structure of this human knowledge. It is a cognitive. Kant argued that the human knowledge consists of two essential important. One is the sensory experience, and another is the conceptual framework. In these two dimensions, we understood the Kant's philosophy. I simplify this argument of the Kant's. So, in the modern days, there is a beyond that few words for our students. Here, the ultimate beneficiary is our students. So we need to understand here what Kant, how we taken into the consideration the Kant's ideal in my day-to-day life. Kantian ethics, and not only Kantian ethics, this Kant's philosophy, essence of this philosophy is to in our day-to-day life we need to practice. When the Skohenberg, the Kant is start to walk in the evening of 3:30, all these people are correct their watches. It is a primary principle is to we follow strictly by way of behavior, by way of confined to your commitment. Besides, there is no time here. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity.
Try to make it very relevant in the field of ethics again. So, before going back, I will ask for two questions. Sir, from the bench.
Yes. I won't ask questions because there is a saying that ask questions which no wise man can answer. I don't wish to be reduced to a fool. I just simplify what's an announcement. I just can. Because you are dealing with something terrestrial as well as celestial. Terrestrial because you are looking at the natural phenomena like earthquake, flood, and so on and so on. And he referred to Copernicus, the astronomer who demolished the old idea that Earth is not the center of the universe. There is a solar system, and there are many universes. Therefore, for all these things, Kant was raised as a Copernicus of philosophy. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Telling our student friends, you have been listening last 1 day. It is about Kant. You can have a question. So we'll go to our second page. Luthien and I to give a dedication.
पानी बोतल पूरा कटे थैंक यू सर देखिए किसी दरकार नहीं सर देखिए हाँ मैं देखूंगा किसी से स्लाइड करें तुम किसी करे दरकार सर असली प्लेयर देखिए पानी बोतल टाइम दिलो मुझे
On this national seminar, and I am very thankful to Professor G.P. Das sir for guiding me throughout my work in this paper. And I am also thankful to my guide Manurajan Maulik sir. And lastly, I'm very obliged to my principal of AMCS College Tikavali Kondhamar to for granting me leave to participate in this seminar. Thank you. The topic of my paper is the concept of synthetic a priori, Kant and his critics. In the history of modern Western philosophy, rationalists led by Descartes aim at exploring truths which are indubitably certain. Taking the help of the method of mathematics, Descartes claims to have found the ground level such truth is cogito ergo sum. On the touchstone of this truth, which is clear and distinct, he proceeds to establish truth about mind, matter, and God. The major presuppositions of Descartes are that reason is the ultimate source of knowledge and authenticated of knowledge, and that there are innate ideas that are grasped by intuitive intellectual analysis. Descartes argues for a structure of understanding which is constituted by a set of innate ideas. These are a priori in the mind before birth. These are suitable more for the justification of religious doctrines and religion-based ethical doctrines than findings of science. In order to do justice to scientific knowledge, empiricists led by John Locke tried to refute the doctrine of innate ideas and advocate that sensation and reflections are the only sources and authenticators of knowledge. For organizing ideas into knowledge in the judgment format, they replaced the mathematical model by first the historical plain method, Locke, and then the method of experimental science, Hume. But they did not succeed in solving the cause of science and establish its doctrines as certain truths. They land on probability and uncertainty about the ideas of matter, causality, space, and time, throwing metaphysics to higher. In this paper, I propose to give a critical exposition of Kant's conception of synthetic a priori and to clarify the distinction between analytic and synthetic as well as between a priori and a posteriori. Moreover, I propose to show how logical positivists and Ludwig Wittgenstein rejected the conception of synthetic a priori, and finally to explore whether the concept of synthetic a priori has any enduring significance. Kant defines an analytic judgment as the one in which the idea of predicate is contained in the idea of subject. If the idea of predicate falls outside the idea of subject, then the judgment is synthetic. We see that Kant's definition is in a psychological ontological mode. In the epistemological mode, an analytic judgment is defined as the one whose truth and falsity can be ascertained by analyzing the meaning of the words that compose it. In the logical mode, an analytic proposition is defined as that whose negation is self-contradictory. The definition in the epistemological mode and logical mode are linked with each other as truth conditions and meaning are linked with each other. John Hospers lays down certain objections against the analytic-synthetic dichotomy. The first objection is that the analytic-synthetic distinction does not mark a real difference. On closer analysis, it would be found that all propositions are analytic. This view may be attributed to Leibniz. According to his view of monads, the predicate in a judgment is an explication of what is contained in the subject implicitly. Our conception of Adam is limited. We know only a few things about him. That he was the first man on the earth, that he ate the apple offered by Eve, etc. According to Leibniz, Adam was the first man is analytic. When we know other things about Adam, the propositions reporting them would be also analytic. On this view, the proposition rose is red is as much as analytic proposition. Red is a color. It is supposed here that all the characteristics of a thing are its defining characteristics. The second objection is that all the characteristics of a thing are its. The second objection is that there is no clear distinction between analytic and synthetic, and therefore it is useless. But this objection does not have any merit because this distinction drawn clearly and used widely to clarify matters. The third objection is that sometimes it is the case that a proposition is a part of a large body or a system of propositions, and whether the given proposition is analytic or does not or not, it depends upon the status in that system of propositions. Take for example, Newton's 3 laws of motion. Each of these laws by itself appears like a definition and hence it's analytic. But the question would arise, If they are analytic, how could they be said to have been discovered? There is another point. Take for example, Euclid's geometry. A point, a straight line, an angle, etc. are given definitions, and hence the definitions are treated as analytic. But they are analytic only within the system of Euclidean geometry. There are alternative geometries, for example, the geometry of Riemann and that of Lobachevsky. In their systems, the definitions of Euclid would not be regarded as definitions, hence not analytic. But this does not harm the dichotomy. Truth possibilities are supposed to be two and two only. Contingently true happens to be true, and necessarily true must be true. What makes necessary truths necessary? It is replied that necessary truths are necessary because they are knowable a priori, that is independent of verification by experience. Why are they knowable a priori? It is because they hold true necessary for all the cases, for all the time, past, present, and future. A true statement is a priori because its truth cannot be known a priori. We would have to test it to see whether it holds good for further cases. This way of defining analyticity in terms of a priority and a posteriority in terms of existence is illogical. The distinction between analytic and synthetic is a logical distinction. As we know, on the basis of region, we distinguish knowledge into two types. One is a priori and another is a posteriori. But on the standpoint of logic, we distinguish knowledge into two types. One is analytic and another is synthetic. So the distinction between analytic and synthetic is a logical distinction, whereas the distinction between a priori and a posteriori is an epistemological distinction. Horsford's makes the logical distinction depend on an epistemological distinction. Horsford's make logical distinction depend on an epistemological distinction, which is a grave logical error. Logic is wider than epistemology. Logic pervades the world, says Wittgenstein. In other words, meaning logically precedes truth or falsity. Unless a given proposition is meaningful, it cannot be an item to be tested for truth or falsity. A true proposition is meaningful and a false proposition is meaningful too. But if an alleged proposition is meaningless, it cannot neither true nor false. Hence, analyticity must not be defined in terms of a priority. Horsford considers the question, how is synthetic a priori knowledge is possible? He terms it as rational insight theory. According to the rationalist, we derive certain concepts from experience. After that, we see that they necessarily go together, like being colored and being red. Once we understand what it to be colored and what it is to be red, we have a rational insight that whatever thing is red is color. This rational insight theory is not so much important as Kant's doctrine of synthetic a priori. Kant reacted sharply to David Hume's dichotomy of human knowledge into number one, knowledge concerning matters of fact and existence, number two, knowledge concerning quantity and number. Scientific knowledge comes under the first category and the mathematical knowledge comes under the second category. Hume puts alleged metaphysical knowledge under fire. Hume declares that mathematical knowledge is subtle but not applicable to experience, whereas scientific knowledge is applicable to experience but not certain, only probable. Kant presented a trichotomy of human knowledge by clarifying two distinctions: A, between analytic and synthetic; B, between a priori and a posteriori. The three divisions of human knowledge are: number one, analytic a priori; number two, synthetic a posteriori; and the most important, number three, synthetic a priori. Synthetic a priori judgments, according to Kant, constitute the very foundations of mathematical knowledge and scientific knowledge, as well as the metaphysical knowledge. Synthetic a priori assures judgment of their applicability to experience as well as their certainty both. Human mind has a cognitive structure which produces knowledge out of the sense given data. It is conceptual grid which is put upon reality, so to say, for ordering it. Hospers give a simple analogy to make it intelligible. Suppose that somebody always puts on red glasses. He sees everything necessarily as red in different shades. His description of the world would be the world as seen through red glasses. But the world is not red. This he knows because he is able to put off red glasses. But the universal cognitive structure of mind of man, about which Kant speaks, cannot thus be put off. आमे चश्माटा को काढी दबा किंतु आम माइंड रे जो कॉन्सेप्चुअल बा हमर जो कॉन्सेप्चुअल स्ट्रक्चर ताको केबे काढी परिबे. Kant describes this structure in a systematic way with the help of Aristotelian logic, which he takes to be final and ultimate in organizing judgments. According to Kant, judgment, which is same as knowledge, is produced by 4 units or synthesis. Number one, synthetic unit of sense given manifold. That is, the manifold becomes one. And the second one, unity of the representations of sense with the categories of understanding. Here the object is produced. When the categories are applied to the manifold of sensation, then the object is produced. Second one. And the third one, synthetic unity of a perception, that is the transcendental eye. Number 4, unity of objects of sense with transcendental eye. By this, judgments about the world is produced. A total ସବୁ जाक मिसला को हमरो judgment produce होउछ. Kant finally says that this knowledge is about phenomenon only. What lies beyond the application of forms of intuition and categories of understanding is noumenon, which is unknown and unknowable. This noumenon is not empty, nothing, but the logical correlate and the ground of phenomenon. The doctrine of synthetic a priori, which is based on and lays support to Aristotelian logic, Euclidean geometry, and Newtonian physics, has been challenged by philosophers, especially by philosophers of analytic tradition, who emphasize on propositions and their meaning. Logical positivism has rejected the possibility of synthetic a priori. The expression is a contradiction in terms, they say. Whatever is synthetic are a priori and vice versa. Similarly, whatever is analytic is a priori and vice versa. AJR points out that Kant does not give one straightforward criterion for distinguishing between analytic and synthetic propositions. Kant gives two different criteria. One is psychological and another is logical. When Kant says that 7 plus 5 is equal to 12 is synthetic, he says that the subjective intention of 7 plus 5 does not comprise the subjective intention of 12. But when saying all bodies are extended is analytic, he says that the opposite of it is self-contradictory. Ayer suggests for preserving the logical import of Kant's distinction between analytic and synthetic propositions while rejecting the psychological import. As a result of this, while it is true that we have a priori knowledge of necessary propositions, it is not true, as Kant supposed, that any of these necessary propositions are synthetic. They are without exception analytic propositions. In other words, tautologies. Logic, truth, language, truth, and logic, page number 84. Ludwig Wittgenstein is regarded as critical philosopher 20th century, continuing the work of Kant, the critical philosopher of 19th century. David Pearce marks Kant's work as critical philosophy, phrase 1, and Wittgenstein's work in the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus as critical philosophy, phrase 2. In this book, we find that Wittgenstein furthers the work of Kant insofar as transcendental philosophy is concerned. But while doing so, he did not agree with Kant in many respects. For example, Wittgenstein does not accept Kant's idea of space and time as forms of intuition, nor does he accept Kant's doctrine of categories. In some aphorisms of Tractatus, Wittgenstein rejects by implication Kant's doctrine of synthetic a priori. Wittgenstein seeks to find out how thought expressed in proposition and get referred to the world. Language is the totality of proposition and world is the totality of facts or states of affairs. A proposition refers to the world by being a picture of a possible state of affairs. Tractatus Act 2.225 says there are no pictures that are true a priori. And in the aphorism 3.04, if a thought were correct a priori, it would be thought whose possibility ensures its truth. Compare 3.05, that a priori knowledge that a thought was true would be possible only if its truth were recognizable from the thought itself without anything to compare with it. W.V.O. Quine in the paper 2 Dogmas of Empiricism takes on the distinction between analytic and synthetic to be a dogma for the following reasons. Number one, this distinction does not have any explanatory value. Second, the distinction is based on the idea of self-contradictoriness and meaning which are not themselves clear. And number three, the idea of meaning is dependent on the idea of definition or synonym, and the idea of analyticity is dependent on the idea of meaning. Thus, involves a vicious circle. P.F. Strawson has written a commentary on Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, bearing the title "The Bounds of Sense." He comments that that Kant did not have the right conception of synthetic a priori. It is not clear what Strawson means to say, whether the concept of synthetic a priori is wrong or the conception is right, but Kant did not give a correct presentation of it. This remains to be a debatable issue. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam, for talking about the most popular topic, that's synthetic a priori. The concept is well known among all philosophical traditions, and it is one of the very crucial doctrine of synthetic a priori from which a paradigm shift has taken place in the philosophy of philosophy. And we find analytical philosophy and also transcendental philosophy diverging from the theory concept of synthetic a priori of Kant. Anyway, you have very, very important points: logical distinction and epistemological distinction. Analyticity cannot be defined in terms of a priori, and you have contradicted perspective, right? So now it is open for discussion, and I will invite any two questions. Take the mic.
Thank you, sir. Are synthetic a priori judgments absolute and unchangeable? And if yes, then Kant's claim about space and time being synthetic a priori judgment, is it relevant in light of Einstein's theory of relativity?
Yeah, space and time are not synthetic a priori.
Are they unchangeable and absolute? Synthetic a priori. Are synthetic a priori judgments unchangeable and absolute? And
You
if
said-
space and time is it synthetic a priori judgment?
Those are forms of condition. Space and time are also not objects like Newton says. They are the subject conditions. Knowledge producer by conditions.
Now, the synthetic a priori judgments, are they absolute or
No, absolute in the sense
are they changeable or unchangeable?
that
Now, are you relating it to theory of relativity?
Yes.
Exactly. But when we consider theory of relativity, it's a very different thing. Why different? Theory of relativity is something like space and time acts differently in different situations.
They are related.
They are related, but not equal. When we see a phenomenon like thunder, which is lightning at one point, and when we see from a distance place. But if we go into a running train or something like that, which has a frame of reference, which gets a high amount of speed, then the speed we are traveling towards the thunderbolt, that sounds different. First, when the thunder gets in one point at the same time, but in a space and time, it transmits in a very different way. First, sound is heard and lightning is spread towards which we are moving, and the last one is here.
It's based on the observer.
Based on the observer. So, observer, that's the.
I just wanted to clarify if it is this synthetic a priori judgment.
Not exactly. We cannot relate it to philosophy like that.
Now you said whether it is the changing, you see the law of causality, every event has a cause. It is synthetic, right? And it does not change. But as the example of lightning and thunder, when two clouds clash with one another, thunder and lightning are moving. This is a causal doesn't. This causal does not change. In future cases, that might class clouds for no activity. That might change. But every test does not change. It's a heuristic proposition. It gives the scientists a boost the ground of the establishing for the objection would say every test cause is not itself a law, it's a form of the law. Law is form on basis, the basis. That is not the case. The synthetic development is indicated because of just arithmetic science and might be metaphysics, they will change. Development based upon those things might change. That's all.
Anybody else?
Not questioning.
Yeah.
He correctly said, what is fixed in the mind, even after removing the spectacle that reveals that. Right? If they say to a jaundiced eye, the whole world looks yellow. Bertrand Russell gave an example. If you put on a spectacle of blue glasses, the whole world will look blue. Kant said, give a spectacle to the mind's eye, market, and you will see the whole space. This may be relative. It cannot be absolute. It cannot be synthetic. It is only just of trial and error. Thank you.
Anybody else? We'll take one question. We can take one question if anybody is interested to ask. Anybody need clarification or a question? So I think there is no question. I must thank Rekha for a beautiful presentation. Now, Dr. Girish Kumar Das, Department of Political Science, he will speak on Kant's politics. It will be 12 minutes. 10, 12 minutes.
Esteemed chairperson of the session, Professor Kailashchandra Das sir, my co-speakers, Professor B. Venkatrao sir, Ms. Smruti Rekha Naik, my respected sirs and respected delegates, respected participants, dignitaries, and my dear students. At the outset, I would like to tell you that I'm not a student of philosophy. Rather, I belong to political science, to the Faculty of Political Science. So my topic is political philosophy of Kant. Immanuel Kant, who is regarded as the father of the idealist thought, became professor at the University of Königsberg. Kant was greatly influenced by Montesquieu and Rousseau. The latter thinker specially left a deep impact on Kant's mind and studied his Emile with rapt attention. He held Rousseau so much in admiration that he kept a bust of his great philosopher in his study room. Kant acknowledges the impact of Rousseau on his thought and said, Rousseau, let me write. Learn to respect human nature, and I should consider myself far mere unless than the ordinary working man if I did believe that this view would be worth to all others to establish the right man. Commenting on the impact of Montesquieu and Rousseau on Kant, Professor Dunning says, his doctrine as to the origin and the nature of the state is merely Rousseau's put into the grab of Kantian terminology. His analysis of the government follows Montesquieu in the like manner. Kant attached great importance to the individual in his political thought and asserted that an individual was an end in himself and should not be treated as a means to an end. However, he insisted that the individual should not aim at particular advantages or satisfactions, but at those ends which are of universal application. Kant showed great passion for individual liberty and equality and was not prepared to sacrifice them at the altar of the state. No doubt, Kant was in favor of this. Kant was in favor of subordination of the individual liberty in favor of the higher needs of the society. But this should not give the impression that he was willing to surrender the liberty of the individual. Kant accepted the concept of social contract, but never used it to explain the origin of the state. He, on the other hand, used it to show the binding nature of relationship between the government and the people. He says that by the contract, men surrender their eternal freedom in order to receive it immediately back again as member of the Commonwealth. Kant laid great emphasis on the rights and duties of individuals. He defined right as the limitation of freedom of any individual to the extent of its agreement with the freedom of all other individuals, insofar as this is possible by a universal law. According to him, the rights are the creation of the state, and the only original right belonging to each man in virtue of his humanity is freedom. He further asserted that each right carried with it corresponding duty. According to him, each individual owes duty to himself, to other members of the state, and to the state. To him, duties were more important than rights. However, he didn't specify the duties of the individual and said that duties were a matter of inner consciousness. As an individualist, Kant did not favor grant of extensive powers to the state. He did not consider it duty of the state to promote moral freedom and wanted the state merely to hinder the hindrances of freedom and to establish social conditions of outward order in which truly moral acts may gradually evolve a kingdom of humanity. According to Barker, the attitude of Kant towards free state was on the whole somewhat grudging and individualist. Kant doesn't concede to the individual the right to revolt against the state because the existing of the state was necessary for the moral growth of the individual. According to him, the overthrow and execution of the sovereign was a sin for which men could not be forgiven in his or the next world. He said that if the people were unhappy with the existing constitution and law, they could seek changes through the sovereign through peaceful method and could not resort to revolution under any circumstances. Kant envisaged three forms of states: autocracy, aristocracy, and democracy, and two forms of government, the republican and the despotic. He believed that only a representative form of government was rational. According to him, the king, the nobility of the elected deputies could act as representatives. He divided the function of the state on the traditional pattern as legislative, executive functions as essential for the enjoyment of liberty. According to Professor Gettel, conditions in Prussia led to Kant to attempt to reconcile the doctrine that the general will of the people is sovereign with the belief that this sovereignty could be exercised through a monarchic form of government. Kant was a great advocate of universal peace. He said that the state, like men, are quarrelsome and jealous by nature. They resort to wars for the expansion of boundaries. Even during times of peace, they make preparations for defense, which was an burdensome and destructive of internal welfare as well as war itself. He held that the doctrine of balance of power could not be helpful in checking the wars, and the only possible countermeasure to this state of affairs was to have a system of international right founded upon public laws conjoined with power to which every state must submit. According to Kant, the republican states were more conducive to world peace because the governments rest on the will of the people and can wage war only with their consent. He argued that the presence of popular sovereignty amongst the family of states was vital for world peace, because in this absence of the nations could make their own decisions on peace or war and endanger the world peace. He wanted the individual republics to be part of the world republic and said that the safeguarding of world peace ultimately depends upon the relationships with other states being regulated by law. Thus, we find that Kant's idea of world peace was not based on Christian love, but upon law. Kant considered the institution of private property essential for the development of the individual. However, he was not willing to accept the right to property as a natural right. According to him, the individual derived this right from the society. Further, this right was not absolute in the sense that individual could acquire anything and everything. The individual had to exercise this right, keeping into his mind the interest of his neighbors. Kant made a valuable contribution to the idealist thought and has been regarded as the forerunner of this school of philosophy. Dr. W. Klinkin has showered a great praise on Kant and observed, Kant ushered in a new epoch in philosophical thought. His major writings constitute a milestone in the history of philosophy. He is one of those great and profound thinkers who, by their works, but also by their lives, exercise a lasting influence upon the intellectual life of their own times and prosperity. No one concerned with philosophy can pass by the theories whose further development continues to this day. According to Reynold Ayres, Kant's lasting merit in the history of politics lies in the emphasis which he laid upon the idea of the state subject to the rule of law and the clear realization that the chief task of the state was to secure justice. Highlighting the impact of Kant on the latter philosopher, Professor Wright says, since 1781, every philosopher of consequence has in some way or other, positively or negatively, consciously or unconsciously, been indebted to Kant and immediate success. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Girish Mardas. And now, philosophy students are not much acquainted with the Kant's political philosophy as such, but he was so lucid and very clear in his eye that everyone can understand this. So, as you know, Kant is not very much appreciative of having international peace by means of law. Law will be delivered, but by law. So, rule of law is one of the factors. I wish you there, and then I request any of you can have a question. You can ask 2 questions you can take. Yes. After that,
My last participation in this investigation. I will not rise again. You said about sovereignty. Who is sovereign? State of India.
No, he said social contract. That means the people make a contract
With
themselves,
With the state.
with that. Oh yeah,
Right.
that is so.
I put an expert, Arun Lasky, from your political science.
Last.
In his book called Grammar of Politics, he has mentioned a very interesting idea. It would be a lasting benefit to the study of political science had the concept of sovereignty been surrounded, because you go on searching for sovereignty, it is nowhere found except within the India. You are sovereign by divine right. That is one. And second one, in rigid separation of power, which is Montesquieu, Rousseau and Voltaire, when they said that 3 pillars of our democracy, what was Gandhi? Did he subscribe to it? The rigid separation of power, executive, legislature? And
Yeah. Yes. He has divided powers. Executive, legislative.
But then very often you will find that they are transgressing each other. Executive running into legislature, because they are appointed judiciary. They want the judges who revolted. in a critical situation. It's a critical state with the rigidity of separation of power.
One more.
Thank you, sir, for your lucid presentation. Kant had published a famous paper titled Perpetual Peace. So there he made a point that for international peace, for world peace, there shall be a League of Nations.
League of Nations.
So as a result, there was a president, Woodrow Wilson. So he was, prior to becoming the president, he served as a professor of law and philosophy. And actually he was a Kantian philosophy or expert, Kantian expert. So during his presidency, he suggested that he made a 14-point speech. So in that 14 point, he suggested that a League of Nations should be constituted. As a result, in 1945, the United Nations was constituted. So the intention of Kant to establish international peace seems to have failed, because we see, to take the recent examples of the West Asia conflict. So it seems that the intention of Kant has failed. So as a political thinker, how do you, I mean, is there any substitute?
No, actually, Kant said that international peace can be established not by love, but by law. That is why he used that League of Nations, United Nations. International peace cannot be established through love. It can be achieved only through law.
Yeah. And there are laws,
Yeah.
the United Nations organization, there are laws.
Actually, what he says is, there is a international law and rule of law. If it fails, by law we cannot rule. That has a weakness. That may be having weakness, but the law is because it's talking about the categorical equality. So law becomes a condition. So it is emotions it will be against, and reason is in favor. So if it's in favor of reason, that law is the only thing that will take in short. So if law also, you don't obey laws, that's another altogether different matter. But law is not a thing. That means a law will be among nations. It's not practically possible in shape. And this is not an equality also. Right?
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your very nice paper. We got it to the end of this session. So this was a very good session, and all the three speakers spoke very brilliantly, and they have a very nicely prepared, and most important concepts were discussed there. Many good questions were raised. Thank you all of you. Thank you so much. You are making this very, very meaningful. Our students also initiated to discuss not least, but the clarification. Indeed, we cannot have a final answer, final question to anything, and this is a process. The dialectic should go on, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for your nice chair this session. And I also express a heartfelt gratitude to the speakers for their thought-provoking presentation on Kant's philosophy from the different angles. Now it is time to felicitation. Now I request Professor Amulya Ranjan Mahapatra to come on the dais and to felicitate Professor Venkat Rao. आपण त्याच वाचून I request Professor Radhanath Behra sir to felicitate Dr. Girish Das. I request Kailash sir to felicitate Shruti.
I think I am to be felicitated. On which slide? Felicitated is the.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Now it is time for the launch. We will meet again sharply 2:30. There are also 5 papers are there. Before 4, we have to complete our academic session because the Vice Chancellor will arrive at a sharp 4. We will start our valedictory function. So I request all of you to present again here 2:30. 2:30.